So you and I are human beings, the conquerors of this world, by far the smartest and most sentient life form on this planet we call Earth. Amidst the billions of other species, here we are, the most complex, able to understand such intricate concepts and ideas, able to experience a range of emotions and memories, able to rise above our animalistic instincts and live up to what it means to be a part of mankind. That is the reason for the human being, to rise above our animalistic instincts, to have inner control and not succumb to your emotions, to be a vessel of free will instead of a vessel of impulse, to love instead of lusting aimlessly, to have morality and pursue this gift of understanding, to recognize your cosmic responsibility and live a life rooted in meaning, pure meaning, this meaning that we can comprehend and understand so intuitively, to explore this meaning based on intelligence, mindfulness and goodness. Al-Ghazali said that the human purpose is to purge base instincts, to elevate the soul through knowledge and virtue, and align oneself with God's will, leading to true happiness both spiritually and intellectually. From observing lower life forms, we can understand that chivalry and order comes from higher intelligence. We were given the gift of intelligence, therefore it's important that we don't find meaning in what clearly leads us astray from the divinity in which we were formed. With all this insight and knowledge, we can rise above hatred, stupidity, selfishness, greed, jealousy, envy, long for power, materialism, all things that I talk about that anchor you mentally, therefore spiritually. I talk about this thing called the subconscious a lot, as a deeper and more interconnected field of awareness, a spiritual field with higher and lower forces dictating it, depending on the forces that we align ourselves with, that God is at the top and the devil/enemy is at the bottom. Whether you agree with me or not, there is no doubt that there are certain forces in this world that lead people closer to their inner demons, that lead them astray from goodness, from their true selves, from their higher selves. Once you come closer and closer into the embrace of the enemy, your animalistic instincts take over once more. Your emotions like sadness, anger, and envy are more aggressive, your free will reduces, you're in a constant state of insecurity, fears and desires are reinforced, temptation holds over you. Most people fall into a balance of both, not completely astray, but also not completely in line with your soul's purpose, dipping up and down between both. However, that state that flows with inner intelligence, mindfulness, diminishment of the toxic ego, transcendence of worldly desires like lust and materialism, that's when the doors to higher consciousness open, that the reward of the beauty of the interconnected universe would be given to those that can look past the distractions of the earth and onto the universe. The first step is being able to maintain your happiness, to not be mentally chained as it will make you spiritually changed, doing what you can to maintain it without pursuing anything that would be seen as spiritually impure. And yeah, unfortunately this privilege isn't available to every human being. Whether it's through war, poverty, disability, trauma, or any other circumstances, they are not able to pursue their soul's calling, meaning that those who are lucky enough to be born from a place of privilege with all the opportunities, knowledge, and free will at the tip of their fingers, with nothing holding them back other than their ego and base desires. The biggest indicator to inheriting higher consciousness comes from your dreams. They'll shift from random iconography to symbolism and divine insight, with sentient forces shaping them. Things like shared dreaming can occur, two people having the same dream, which is what proved to me that when we dream we go to another plane of existence, and that my previous symbolic dreams were coming from a place of truth. You can also get dreams of the future, which again confirms that aligning yourself with the peak of your subconscious aligns you with the beautiful interconnectedness between your soul and this universe. You'll get more spiritual experiences. Something like sleep paralysis is actually a gateway to this kind of thing. Whenever I submit to the pressure and let my body fall asleep while my mind is still awake, I get interesting encounters with higher beings, guiding me towards truth. And when I've been spiritually impure, I get the exact opposite, lower forces of fear and illusion. Between states when your mind is awake but your body isn't, you could hear voices of the peak of your subconscious speaking to you, your higher self, your spiritual essence, your true, most evolved self, distinct from your ego and personality. It represents the wisest, the most compassionate and enlightened aspect of your being, connected to a universal consciousness and seeking your soul's purpose and growth. It's basically your soul speaking directly to you. More evidence that we are biologically designed to pursue this inner calling, that the subconscious isn't only an abyss, a byproduct of neutral activities shaped by personal experiences, but instead a structured system that has different levels of consciousness, needing clarity, purity, and control over the mind to interpret it properly, to interpret the full nature of this interconnected field hidden at the peak. This peak that reveals the creation of the God of the universe, the ultimate consciousness, the core of existence. You need to stop viewing him as the man in the sky, but instead as a universal consciousness that illuminates in all things, Once you elevate your consciousness by aligning yourself in his path, by staying mentally pure, which in turn means spiritually pure, again, the subconscious is a gateway to spirituality. I'm not telling you what to specifically believe in, I'm just pointing out that there is a very clear spiritual world out there, waiting for you to inherit it and discover the true potential of the human vessel. To see that there really is a higher power, that our consciousness isn't limited to this physical plane, that we exist in a system, and that there is no death, only transformation. To think that between the infinite nothingness of before birth and the infinite nothingness after death, here lies a tiny speck of existence, one so finely tuned and precise that we can comprehend such intricate meanings, amidst the billions of species around us that cannot. The chances of being human are said to be impossibly rare. Let me ask you this, if your parents had never met, would you have not been born? Was your very existence dependent on those two variables aligning perfectly over billions of years? Or is consciousness measured by something else? Something that exists outside of this physical world? Something more eternal and infinite? There are many different ways in how people interpret the idea of the soul, but it all points into a specific design, a higher power, a god. Now, if you want to associate this with religion, that's up to you. There is a common outlook adopted by many spiritual people that the idea of religion was made to control the masses and limit you spiritually. And the idea of God and higher states of consciousness were always a thing before the Abrahamic religions, which is true. I mean, the idea of God was always a thing and people were tuning into it, aligning their consciousness with their soul, their divine. That yes, this idea was always prevalent before the existence of Abrahamic religions. I personally think there is a story to be told with the Abrahamic religions that points to a clear truth in Islam, especially because a lot of people don't know that the spiritual side of Islam heavily aligns with common spiritual frameworks and ideas. But again, this video isn't telling you what to believe, simply informing you that yes, there is a spiritual world and it's waiting for you. I see so many atheists who completely dismiss the idea of God and spirituality immediately, specifically due to religious people who aren't able to understand or interpret the underlying themes and values of their scriptures, but instead claiming it as an identity and unintentionally spewing more hate and discernment over an unrealized perception of their religion. So in many ways, I don't blame them. Like, look at how a lot of Make America Great Again Christians weaponize it to push their hateful agendas, or how many Jews use it to justify genocide, or how some Muslims even fail to interpret the true teachings of the Quran and use it to control women and justify their misogynistic ideologies. Again, these are people whose egos have become so toxic and tainted that they believe what they're doing is right and God's will. Again, overlooking the overarching themes of kindness, to not judge, for free will, for empathy, for choice. Unfortunately, we live in a world with really stupid people who are again blinded to their inner wisdom because of their corrupt egos. However, it seems like there's a pattern that these spiritual experiences only happen to people who have inner wisdom, who are calm and peaceful, who don't succumb to their addictions or emotions, whose egos are not tainted by toxicity, who utilize their free will in ways that satisfy their soul. They all seem to have very similar experiences. These are people who look past the spiritual chains of this world and look onto their universal calling. Again, all these people recall having very similar spiritual experiences. Hallucinations aren't this consistent. There are so many people talking about the higher self, how they've tapped into the peak of their subconscious. There is a certain way to live, that you are rewarded from inner wisdom. There's a reason they want you hooked on porn, constantly in fear, always comparing yourself and judging others, tainting your ego, reinforcing your insecurities, reinforcing your addictions, and your entire perception of the world. They're trying to mentally trap you, therefore spiritually anchoring you. They don't want you seeing the truth. We were created with order, so when we pursue that order by keeping mental clarity and refusing their traps of lower resonance, we unlock the true potential of our spiritual power. Atheists love to paint the picture that we're all hearing voices and having hallucinations, but if only they could use their brains and differentiate between the mentally ill, alcoholic, drug addict who has schizophrenia and claims to hear voices that reinforce fears, between the calm and peaceful guy who is mentally healthy, doesn't succumb to his bad emotions, is able to maintain his happiness without stress or worry, has emotional intelligence and no toxic ego, doesn't indulge in materialism or lust or his base desires. When he says he hears voices that seem to be guiding him to a place of truth and elevating him beyond himself, you have to stop and think, is this really delusion or an echo of something higher? It's almost like consciousness is on a spectrum, where the higher you ascend, the more you align yourself with divine insight. We're not just animals wandering aimlessly. We're vessels of consciousness, designed to rise, to evolve, to connect back to the source from which we were first set free. The human being is not the end of the journey. Again, there is no end, only transformation. Logic itself points to order, a pattern, a divine intelligence woven into the fabric of existence. So elevate and find that order. Choose wisdom, seek meaning, align yourself with higher consciousness. In doing so, you're not just living, you're fulfilling the very reason for being a human being.